My name is Calixto Chinchilla. I'm the founder and executive director of the New York Latino Film Festival. And joining us for this conversation on the potential and the power of diverse entertainment is Stacey De Armas. She's the SVP of Diverse Intelligence and Initiatives at Nielsen. John Gibson, say hi, John. He's the VP of External Multicultural Affairs for the Motion Picture Association. And finally, we have Robin DeJesus, three-time Tony nominee, currently in the critically acclaimed Oscar-nominated Tick, Tick, Boom. Robin's just received, the Hollywood Critics Circle nominee, and he's also recently won and was honored with the Legacy Award from Outfest. So our hats off to all of you guys for joining us, and thank you so much. I first want to preface this, there's a lot of feelings that are going to come from this conversation, and we're going to cover as much as we can, but you know what? This conversation doesn't end here. This is not the end-all, be-all conversation. This is a conversation, I think, that extends to you, the audience, to you, the creators, to you, the filmmakers, the actors, because the work that we do, as advocates, really extends out to you. We really need you and your creativity and your power to get our voices and our stories told. So just be aware of that, I just want to set the expectations for this conversation. And I hope we extend this, even during the festival. But this is going to be an ongoing conversation. And hopefully we set the tone with this one. So first, I want to cover a lot, but I'm going to cover it in a short amount of time. And also, I want everybody to feel like they can jump in. We're in a big conversation together. I usually don't like to do panels where one person speaks, the next, or whatever. Let's just keep it, definitely free flowing. But first of all, Stacey, I want to start with you because you're the basis of this. Nielsen has just come out with a report talking about underrepresentation in a multitude of ways. From the Hollywood perspective to, streaming representation, film, content, even representation to how we're being seen culturally on screen. You identified the rise in Asian Latinos, Afro-Latinos, Caribbean representation in the screen. So the new news is that Nielsen has quantified that underrepresentation, in your recent reports. So just briefly walk us through these highlights and some of the stuff that you've uncovered in your recent research.
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be with you all. This is a total thrill. So I promise I will take the data nerd part and make it as fun and sexy as I can.
Okay.
I'm going to try really hard. So what I'll tell you is, while I'm not on screen and I'm not producing content, we're not doing that at Nielsen. What we do think is really important, as you mentioned, is measuring what representation looks like on screen, because we know that the people that greenlight content, decide who gets to be where, want to see this data, because increasingly the narrative around who's presented on screen and how we are presented is becoming something that brands and advertisers are interested in for the small screen. They want to know that their ads and their messages are within inclusive content. And of course, distributors, producers, content developers want to make sure that their content reflects what we really look like, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because that's what people want to see these days. So without getting into all the numbers, what I can tell you is, representation on the surface looks better, right? We all know we've seen more content this year and more narrative than we ever have before. But when you peel the layers back, it's still not great. Your representation is overall, it's like 6% for Latinos, for example, on broadcast TV. And even if you look at like Black representation, you might go, oh, it's about 20% in film and on TV. But the truth is, when you peel it back, it's not the nuance and where we are represented, where Black people are represented, the types of roles still, don't really give the type of visibility that's important. As an example, Black women, really not as present on screen as Black men. And of course, the storylines not very well represented. So I'll pause at that, but would love to get into any detail.
And I've also heard the same for like Latinos, as far as, some people are saying, more Latino men get represented in television more than women. I don't know. Have you discovered that as well?
Yeah, gender's a really...
Particularly on lead roles.
I'm sorry?
Particularly in lead roles is what I've heard.
Gender representation is really, really important. And one of the things that we see across the board is that men just in general have a tremendous amount of representation. So even though any group like Latinos are well underrepresented, let's talk about Afro-Latinos as an example, tremendously underrepresented on screen. And then when you look at women versus men, even lower for women. So there really is an opportunity to improve gender representation overall. And when men are present in content, part of the study we put together is that a lot of times thematically, how men are presented in content, in particular men of color, black and brown men, it is almost always, and you think, God, it's such a stereotype. Like, are we still there? We really are. Thematically around crime, around dysfunction, and you think, how are we still here? We've seen better roles. But the truth is, the vast majority of visibility is not where it should be.
I'm gonna keep it 100. The thing that concerns me is, we've seen these reports. We've seen the Annenberg reports. We've seen the UCLA reports. We've seen your report. I've seen every report. And John and I, in particular, we talk all the time every time we see these reports. And I hate to say this because I've been doing this for quite a while. I feel like it feels cut and paste. I feel like I'm seeing the same thing every year. We're having the same conversation every year. And sometimes it feels like it's 2 steps forward and then we're 2 steps still. Not even 2 steps back. We're just like still, we're not moving. And so for me, in your experiences, right, you come out with these reports, you deliver them. What is the industry response to all of that? Because sometimes I feel like the quick industry response is, oh, we're going to create the talent competition. Oh, we're going to create the 1-year initiative.
Right.
And it's
like we're going to do this right.
Do all that. And it's like, I've yet to see transformative action. And so what are you getting from this? And is the industry listening?
So that is such a great point. And I want to open by saying, hats off to Dr. Darnell Hunt, Anna Cristina Ramon, who have put together, really these industry reports that guide us all, and they give us those annual benchmarks of what's happening and where we're at. The work that Nielsen is trying to do is a little bit different. What we're trying to do is, and we put out a report each year to give, our update as well. But what we really are aiming to do is operationalize that data in such a way that it's not an annual yearbook, right? Here's what happened, but operationalize it and put it on the desks of decision makers at studios, those who are distributing and acquiring content, greenlighting content, so that they have data on their desks, essentially operationalized in a platform that they can look at quarterly in any type of cut that they want that tells them how they're performing, what the industry looks like, where they're up, where they're down. And I think that type of accessibility, making the data that accessible and touchable, is what's going to ultimately drive change, because that data is linked. The other unique thing Nielsen can do is link that data to performance data, how well something's doing, right? Either box office, how well it's doing, ratings, audience. And when you connect diverse content to performance data, that's what's going to drive some change.
Yeah, because if anything, I think that us as a culture, we've gotten just even more powerful, right? So it's like, we know that we over-index in streaming consumption, mobile consumption, digital consumption, even, entertainment. We know our power at the box office. It hasn't decreased because as the population increase, it's getting even more powerful. But John, what is, you get the reports, your studio partners see the reports. Well, what is the feedback that you're getting, A, and then what is it that you want to see more of?
Now, my check is not big enough to answer all of that. However, I will say, look, first and foremost, you have to get people from our communities in positions where they're greenlighting, where they're shepherding these projects. You have to get people writing these stories. You can't go from the days of people not part of our community writing stories, and then we are like, no, that's not our authentic stories, telling us about our communities. So you got that pipeline, that executive pipeline has to be open for all marginalized communities. And that is happening. We do know that there are executives, black and brown, now at the studio. So if you look at, we're not where we were 5 years ago. We are making progress, but we have a long way. It really is a marathon. It is, but it's one that we have to move quickly on. We simply have to. And going back to something that Stacey said about, even if you look at the Black numbers, and you'll hear some folks say, well, if you look at 10% of leads, but Latinos and Black Americans over-index. So let's start by the consumption, the advertising dollars. It should match that. So I'm saying more than half of your shows should have Black and brown leads because we over-index. That's just it. Let's just start there. So I don't like to personally hear about, well, the population. No, we over-index. And the Latino audience driving domestic box office, supporting all types of projects. So let's see more. Like right now, I'm obsessed with Promised Land because it's in the vein of really good storytelling. It is, as much as I love Yellowstone and Succession, I love Promised Land. It's just family dynamics about an enterprise. And guess what? I can relate. Am I Latino? No, but we need more of that intersectionality. It gets frustrating when people just simply want to see themselves. And even like some of these crime shows, I can't watch them anymore because I'm tired of us always being locked up, abused. Yeah. I can't. So I need to spend a little bit more time on Hallmark. But, Hallmark needs to diversify a little bit more too. So what are our studios saying? Look, I talked to the multicultural leagues. There has been a sea shift. There's been a seismic shift. And I do believe that I think the number one community that is focused on is the Latino community. It has to be because I'm here in D.C. So many legislators are now looking at it. Our MPA and our member studios, when we go talk about our policy objectives, the Hispanic caucus, the Black caucus, the Asian American Pacific Islander caucus, they're saying, yeah, we'll listen to that. But what are you doing about diversity? What are you doing about showcasing the very best of us? And even when you have to tell stories, true stories about our communities, and they're not always pretty, you balance it with the everyday heroes. You balance it. And that's what I loved about Stacey's report. And Stacey, by the way, I've shared it to some other folks in other industries because people just do not know how to engage the Latino community, the nuances, the diversity within the community. And that's their biggest problem. They don't understand it. And instead of saying, let me partner with the Calypso, let me bring a Stacey in, let me give Robin an additional platform to talk about it, they try to figure it out on their own, and projects don't go anywhere. And then they're like, well, why didn't the community come out and support it? Well, you didn't talk to the true stakeholders.
Well, the other thing, and this is leading to Robin, you mentioned Promised Land, but at the same time, you look at a talented actor like John Ortiz, it's taken him over 30 years just to get a leading role. You look at Clifton Collins Jr., who, was in the recent film Jockey, it took him all these years to get a leading role. You look at a guy like Robin De Jesus, who's with us, it's taken him all this time for me to see a Puerto Rican gay Latino represented on the screen in this way, right? And so, Robin, for you, we could come up with all the research reports all we want. We could be the advocates, but you're the talent. You're the one who's living, breathing. You're speaking on it. You're the one in the audition rooms. You're the one who's seeing, the audition slip. So, how do you navigate as a talent? And again, to John's point, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So, how do you keep it going? In time you're like, I'm done with this.
It's like I didn't grow up playing sports, but I feel like I did because I be doing this and then this and then this and just trying to navigate, because each situation is individual. And, for me, it's been 20 years in the industry. And when I first started in the industry, I work with predominantly people of color. And so there's a part of me that was like a little bit like the issues didn't present as badly as they were because of who I was working with. And that's what I assumed when I was 18, 19 years old, right? And then as the years went on, I noticed that it's like, I feel like I reach a certain point as a queer Latino actor, and then I get into another room where it's like, it's another step up, which means less people who look like me, which then means like a cultural shift, which then means like the process isn't the same, or the way I process isn't treated the same from other people. I found that with success, I began to actually feel more and more othered in my rooms. because people look less like me in comparison to the beginning of my career. Um, and so, you know, that meant that for a while in my late 20s, you didn't see me working as much because I had to turn down work that I felt I knew that for me, I had to play the long game, like Clifton. And so I have to make sure I curate differently in a way that goes, okay, I might play this role that is a gangster for the paycheck, but I know that when I go in, I'm going to make sure that the white creatives know I won't play that part without layers and nuance, and make sure that I don't make that person someone who you know is deserving of empathy, sympathy, and compassion.
Right.
Because yeah, because I don't mind playing villains or people who do bad things, whatever you want to call it. What I do mind is that then I become the representative for my entire culture, whereas white men play murderers and get Oscars, and it's not a representation of their culture. And I feel like part of the colonization for us that we have to navigate is also not policing each other so hard and not being so triggered when we don't see other people of color playing roles that we don't think are honorable. And that's real nuance too. That's also very nuanced because sometimes you think you're doing something good and you're not.
Yeah.
And so I guess ultimately for me now at this point in my career, I'm figuring out what rooms, for example, in theater, I know that I can say more than in film. I know that in theater, my words have more power and can do more change. And they seem to, they have more power. Let's leave it at that. Whereas in film, I got to play the game a little more, and I make sure that I'm connecting with people that I know are moving the culture forward, and that I create my own sort of safety net.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I really appreciated. You had posted something, Robin, on your Instagram, and this is your testament to it's a marathon. You had posted something when you were a teenager. Ron has been in the game since he was a teenager, but when you were, I guess, one of these art high schools, you declared, "I want to be in stage and I want to be in film." And I thought that was like just a hella dope, really adorable, something that I resonated with me because, as a teenager, that was my dream as well. But one thing that you had mentioned that I thought about, I paraphrase it, is that you said when it comes to diversity, this is a paraphrase, it feels like there are other forces making us believe that we all have one cookie.
I know what you're getting at.
So testify, tell us about that.
Well,
How do you navigate when do you, again, from a talent perspective? And I think we've all heard this, there's one cookie, I feel like even when it comes to film, you know what I mean? It's like,
well,
I could mention In the Heights, I could mention West Side Story, but everyone's like, that's the one cookie. And we're all chasing it. I don't.
Well, I think language is really important. And that's why I tried, like, what y'all do is so different than what I do. So I guess.
But we all move each other, right?
Yeah,
because you're getting the data. We're the advocates. John's in the studio system. Stacy's, giving them the message, and all of us move each other in our respective spaces to the greater good, right?
100%. And what it is for me is like what I'm about to say is also, this is something that I discuss a lot with my friends in social circles. I feel like that's really where the discussions are happening. And what you were talking about, with the cookie is, I feel like, and I'm gonna say white supremacy again. There's this thing where I keep hearing about agents who tell their clients, white clients specifically, or light skinned POC folks, and they say, oh, you know what? They want to go black with this, or they tell white folks they're going to go people of color, creating this infighting, right? But then also within POC folks, like, white folks think that diverse casting oftentimes is just black. And the problem with that is like that if that was a pull quote, that would be problematic. There's an and after that when I say that, right? And the and is that no, it's that black folks have been in this country for a very long time and have contributed a significant amount to the country as it is. And Mexican folks too, because I consider them indigenous. And so the thing is like, we hear about this, like, this casting that's going to go diverse, and you see predominantly black people, And we as non-Black POC folks have to call those people, but also still giving love and respect to the Black folks. Because there's this thing where it's like it becomes a tool where they want us to be infighting. And that's really, really scary to me because, you know, going back to Lin-Manuel and the whole thing within the Heights, it's like, it was a criticism that was fair. It was. That said, why isn't Steven Spielberg getting it? Like, why did we attack our own person in that way, but this white man's getting away with it? And all of his publicity is about how they got it right in terms of casting. And listen, there's a lot of good in there. There's a lot of good in there. But the conversation with Heights was about specifically dark-skinned Black folks.
I think also the conversation about Heights became a shade game too.
It did. It absolutely did. And it's just interesting that, like, I don't know. I just think it's interesting that Spielberg isn't receiving as much, and his creative team was not POC. And that's the bigger issue for me, is that everything is so actor-centric, when what we really should be focusing on, because it feels like being actor-centric is skipping steps, is everyone on the creative side.
Stacey, you had something to add to that?
No, I was just hawing over here below the line behind the camera. Like those are the other opportunities that I feel end up allowing the actors to be present, you know, on the screen. It's a full package when we think about representation. And what we often don't talk about, which is what Robin brought up, is, you know, what else is happening besides just who's present in, you know, on the screen.
And let's not get it twisted. A lot of this is PR spins too.
Yes, and I also want to make sure when I just said what I said, because not everyone uses the same dictionary that I use, that when I say Latinos or Latine, Latinx, lo que sea, whatever you prefer, I'm including Black Latina folks.
Black Latinos, yeah.
Because the Venn diagram crosses over with you know what I'm saying. So I want to make sure that that people are receiving that. So from now on, I'll make sure to specify race when talking about Latinos.
Or full spectrum, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But Stacey, I mean, what is more that we can do? Or, you know what I mean, when we deliver the report, what is the response that you get? Like, what is it like, and how do we hold them accountable? How do you hold studios accountable to their word, you know, a little bit more? Because again, I'm looking for a transformative action.
Well, really,
I'm tired of testing. I really am.
What really
and I've done a lot of contests, but still.
I hear you. And what really resonated with me is what you said in the beginning, which is like, look, we see these reports every year, right? We know the numbers, we know what's changing and what's not. And then we have, as Robin said, we have these pieces of content that come out and, you know, he said, attack our own. He's like this, you know, you have this piece of content where the expectation is that it's everything to everyone and all of us, you know, the pressure is so high because there are not enough pieces of content that can really, you know, where we can distribute some of those stories and that representation. So what we think we can do at Nielsen and what we think our role is of course to deliver that data, like the data you said you see, you know, we see those reports, we see that, but we don't want it. We want to do it in a more granular level that allows us to see, you know, like operationalize that data, have it on people's desks, that you can refer to, and not only that the filmmakers can hold themselves accountable for, but the studios, the distributors, those that are acquiring content, those that are serving up content on their platform, you know, Netflix, Hulu. So you can look at this data in a bunch of different ways, and it's flexible, and you have those metrics, those benchmarks that we can hold them accountable to for growth. The other thing we can do is, as I said earlier, is, you know, deliver that performance data, which is different. I'm not just talking about box office data. I'm talking to that small screen. A lot of what's most visible is what we see on our phones, you know, what we see through streaming content and delivering performance data against that. So we know not just how diverse a piece of content is, but what that means to the studio executive, what that means to the audience consuming it. And that is the data we think that will end up ushering in and opening the doors for more content, for more stories. I think, you know, when we think about the magic, you know, what it is when we see the magic on screen of your own community, a story, who has permission to get married and who can fall in love and who can be the authority giving us, you know, the news or the content or who can be that action hero. Those opportunities belong to all of us. And it is through data, we believe, that we'll end up being able to realize more of those.
I also think for me personally, on the film festival side and the advocacy, side that I work in is investment. I want to see investment. And usually I feel, and all up to Tribeca, all up to Sundance, I get them, but they get big funding for diversity initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
We do this on the daily. I do this day in and day out. And so the thing that troubles me is when studios or some corporations or whatever, they'll give it to the Sundances. But the Sundances will ask me for help. And so for me, it's like, we need to invest in the communities that do this on the regular, every day. Because that's the thing that frustrates me. And I give love to all those organizations. I get it. They have a different bandwidth. They have a different reach than I do. But I also have a unique reach that they don't possess.
Bro,
my reach is so unique that you ask me for help.
but bro,
And so that's the problem that I have is like, we need to, I think again, we're the identifiers. We know the creators. We know where they live. I know where the bodies are buried. For me, as my friend would say. And so, and that's my job, right? And so for me, I think that's the thing that becomes troubling for me is, and you even saw this in the summer when corporations were just giving out money, either to POC organizations, and like, what happens? What are we doing? And how do we support really the institutions that are doing this on the daily? That for me is something I want to see a little bit more of. And for me, when you talk about diversity and inclusion, let's talk about diversity and investment.
Yeah. But bro, it also goes to our communities. It's like twofold. Because you have folks that are, let's say, leading Latinos in the industry that will go to Sundance but won't come to you. It's also with some of the Black festivals. They'll go to Toronto, Tribeca, Telluride, but they won't come to the Black and Brown festivals. And because they have visibility and access, unfortunately, corporations and studios and others use them as an intermediary. And we're like, well, what do you think I should go? And they listen to them. So our communities also have to outcry and over index in supporting us and be like, if you don't come here, it's very much, years ago I was on this board, the Latino Donor Collaborative, which has like the leading Latino business leaders in the country. And CBS had to do a shift in how they presented Latino talent in their shows because Walmart and Toyota, which the community over indexes, said that we will no longer support if you don't do it. It's all about advertising dollars. So that was a quick fix. So CBS had to, instead of at third tier, had to make some adjustments because Walmart and Toyota, that have huge Latino support, were going to pull out. So it's twofold in getting the community to support more of what you're doing because you are on the ground, but there's some folks that will only go to some of these festivals and they're part of our communities. So that's part of the problem too. It's come back to homegrown. It's like, give our media an opportunity. It's like, invest in us. Like, it's like, white is not always best. It's not always best. If you're white, you're right. If you're Black, you're back. If you're brown, you're down. Like,
I'd love to add something to that if I can, because I think you bring up such a strong point about advertisers and brands. So here's one of the other ways, or I think about using this data, right? So think about like a brand safety, right? And what I mean by brand safety is ensuring that your brand is within content that aligns with your social responsibility goals. If you have been loud, and you all know, whether you're in the industry or not, over the past year, we've all heard that brands and advertisers are wanting to invest in content that has good representation in Black-owned, Hispanic-owned media. So if one other way for these brands to evaluate content when they want to place their ad, you can't just leave it to your agency and place it in anything. You want to know what is the context of that content. That's another angle of looking at the data that we're trying to bring forward, right? Is let's evaluate what representation looks like in this content, in this show, in this series. Do we want our brand there? Is that a good place for us to be? Or is there a better place? And that's a new way of thinking about advertising. They used to just look at audiences. How many people are watching? Great, let's be there. But now it's how many people are watching and what's the context of that? Is that where I belong? Should I be there? And what does that say about me if I'm not in content that has not only good representation of Black and brown people, but also representation that's meaningful and relevant?
Well, this is for Robin. I mean, but what about our newsrooms? And I was saying this to somebody. The other problem that I have outside of that is our newsroom. So, you know, for me, and even for you, everyone in this room, you know, the trades mean a lot to us. I can count every Latino and Black person that works in a trade publication. And I feel like that, for me, is also a root of a problem, is diversity in the trade rooms. There's one token Latino that's working at Deadline. I know the token Latino, yeah, I know the token Latino that's working at Variety right now. And that's a problem, too. I think it's our newsrooms, because all those people, we're fighting to get our stories told, right? I'm fighting every year. I want to get in a Deadline piece, right? I want to be on the Hollywood Reporter. And every time, you know, our publicist is on it, I mean, every time we get it, that's a victory. But you don't know how long it took for us to get that publication. And for us, how much is that a game changer is, right? We're getting the hit. That I feel like, yeah, I think that's, for me, that's a critical problem, is diversity in the newsrooms, particularly in Hollywood trades, because those are the people that are going to care to cover Robin. Those are the people that are going to care to cover what you're putting out, Stacey, right? And so I think that that's also, you know, something worth addressing. Is like, how do we, you know, we have the African American Critics Circle, which is great. John, you just got an award coming from them this year. But again, you know, how do we even, you know, get them to, you know, I don't know, how do we change the news? You know, because for me, that's critical. I'm tired of that. It can't just be one Latino working at Deadline. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know on my end. The contribution that I can think of, the offering that I have is booyah, 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 is like, make noise. If you know of great organizers and great activists that you know have the same mission statements that you have, make sure that you make yourself available to help them. Make sure, I know people get really mad about this, but I do think that when we see something transgressive, that we do have to call people out. Not necessarily with the intention of shaming, but sometimes that does something too. Sometimes you just gotta embarrass someone for them to like really catch what's happening. And you know what you're saying with news media, it's also interesting because a lot of people are very light skinned. Or at least the people on camera, right? So I guess the biggest offering I have is like, then we have to make sure that we're writing these folks, that we're supporting the folks that need to be supported, and making sure that we're on call whenever there's something we should be on call for.
So when you say call out, do you mean call out strategically? Because now we're in this cancellation age, you know, so where everybody's ready to attack. And then some of the people that are ready to attack, they just want to hear themselves speak, right?
I'm so tired of that because the thing is, the cancellation thing is like another form of white supremacy. Like if you actually, I want to phrase that differently. It's like what white supremacy presents itself throughout the cancellation process. Because if you come correct, if you're called out and you genuinely apologize, Lin-Manuel has an NAACP nomination. And that's not to say that anyone represents all Black people. But I do think that in comparison, the way Lin went about the Heights thing, like, I think he's gotten some love from certain folks. Whereas the folks who double down or who gaslight you when they're called out and try to say, like, I don't know what you're, like that moment at the oh my God, when he won the Oscar for Judas, oh my God, why is his name escaping me? And I love him.
I know.
Daniel
Kaluuya.
Yeah. So he goes to go to the press afterwards, and this reporter was asking him a question about what he thought about Regina's direction and Night in Miami, right? Or whatever the name of the movie was. Pardon, I should know it better. But like,
yeah, Miami, you're right.
Yeah. And the thing is like in that moment, it was just it just shows. It shows how
I
much we
remember that
really
moment. I remember everybody was like, and how he handled it.
yeah, yeah. I
But
lost
yeah,
my
I
breath where I
remember
was
that.
going there, to be honest.
But no, I remember that. I think she had answered.
Oh, she
I think she
gaslit
had
him.
put up the wrong question. He was like, "What are you asking me?"
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like,
He
do you
said
even know who I am or what she did? You know,
he
and the
said
reporter wasn't informed.
yes. I apologize for like talking over it. He said, "Can you ask it again?" And she like reframed it. But afterwards, when she was asked about it, her response was, "Well, I was just asking him this because of the climate of what was happening, and honestly, I'm just shocked he didn't take advantage of the moment to answer the question." And she tried to flip it and blame it on him. And so that's what I'm saying is like that's when I feel like cancellation happens. But I do think that there are situations that people can navigate if they just come correct.
Hey, and Calixto, I'm going to go back to something you were asking about with the Hollywood trades and getting noticed. I think conversations like this is important because now you have viewerships, live viewers that may not be aware that the festival has a very hard time in getting that. And it does, I keep talking about creating an army of advocates who would then, after this is over, will start emailing. Why don't you get press? We have to consistently talk about it. It's the same thing that I know Black media did. Hey, the open letter to Black Hollywood. You know, when no one knows you, we carry you.
Yeah,
Put on far away from us. A scandal happens, we're here again. But you know, it's letting the audience know that our supporters of the festival and all the incredible work that you're doing, we still haven't been able to break through this wall, and we should be able to.
yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's like the audience is first. You know what I mean? Creatives for us. You know, we do this for you guys, for you, the audience,
Absolutely.
and we put our passion, our money, our blood into this. And I always say this to entertain all of you, everybody who's in this room. But everybody has skin in the game. Everyone has skin in this fight. And so, again, there's a lot of feelings in this conversation, but take it, let's learn from it, let's communicate with each other, let's have this conversation at the festival, and even on social. You know, all of us are available on social. We definitely want to have this conversation again, even on a live. You know, this is the first time we've kind of done this in this way. But everyone has a role to play.
Absolutely.
So
In the one of the I can add one of the things that's really promising is there are more of us now. You know, this isn't just being carried by the advocates here or the. I mean, there are businesses like mine, you know, aligned around bringing this data forward and supporting change. So since we've talked about Lynn so much and the great words of Lynn, tomorrow there'll be more of us.
Absolutely.
And may I just say one thing or a little thing real quick? I just want to also say that I don't want anyone to misconstrue our passion or like you know what I'm saying, because when we talk about these things, it brings up so much. It's so triggering. But I also want to celebrate within us that this is also happening because there are shifts happening. There are tectonic shifts happening. So everything that we're experiencing is for good. It's tiring. It sucks that we're still here. But whenever we get information about, oh, we shouldn't be using this word, or, you know, this is what's PC, or this is what's loving, and that's not meant for people to get upset like, oh, we got to be woke. No, it's like, oh my God, we're unearthing so much that we're evolving in the name of love and goodness. Right. So I hope that that's what we can always, that's the perspective that we choose when we have these combos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're about to wrap this up. I wish I could take audience, questions from everybody, but it's going to get a bit overwhelming. But again, this is the start of many conversations. This is, a marathon for all of us. I've been doing this for quite a number of years, and yet I'm still passionate. I'm still motivated. I'm still driven. Every little win is a big win, is a win. So, Robin, to see you win this year is big for the culture. It's big for me for as long as I've known you. John, to see you win, you're getting like 2 awards in less than 2 months this year. Thank you for all the work that you've done. And John practices what he preaches. You know what I mean? got into a partnership with the Motion Picture Association. Yeah, that was literally game changer. But he's such an advocate, such a dear friend. You know, he walks the walk, and I appreciate all the change that you're doing.
Gonna do more. Yeah.
For all of us. Stacy, the same thing. Great to have this conversation with you. Great to break bread with Nielsen. And this is the start of many, you know. So I want to thank all of you, the viewers, everyone who's out there. We do this for you. We do this for us, for the culture. So let's continue to elevate it. And pa'lante siempre. Thank you very much, and have a good night.